Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux, taking a look at race number 12 at Horseshoe Indianapolis on Saturday. It's the Grade 3 Indiana Derby. We're going to take a look at the field. They're going a mile and a 16th. $300,000 is the purse. And you never know, Ashley. A horse that wins this race might go on to some of the bigger three-year-old races in the summer and into the fall.
We've seen it. We've seen horses that are sort of those maybe a little bit of a late developer in their three-year-old season. They come to live in races like this at a mile and a 16th, and they use that as a stepping stone to kind of map out the rest of their three-year-old season and going forward. So when you look at some of the names in here, some horses are coming off of very nice performances, or at least two starts back, a big performance. When you look at Stronghold, his Santa Anita Derby win, I thought was very strong. You have a horse like EJ the Cup, who maybe was underrated after he won the Turf Paradise Derby, but since then he's had two good efforts. And then I don't want to say a newcomer, but a newcomer at least to stakes action on the outside in Dragoon Guard.
But certainly a nice matchup and a nice contrast between an established face like Stronghold, who already is a Grade 1 stakes winner, and a horse like Dragoon Guard, who's stepping up into the stakes ranks for the first time, but has been super impressive recently. Let's say where they all shake out from a pace standpoint after the first half mile. Time from US believes this pace might be fast. Kitty Hawk, who's also cross-entered at Ellis Park on Saturday, has a lot of early speed. If he goes here, I would expect him to make the top. EJ the Cup, Dragoon Guard. These are horses that have shown speed. It'll be interesting to see if Dragoon Guard can maybe rate a little bit if there are other speeds in front of him.
I think the other one to point out here into is the 6er Greyland, because this is a horse that has two tries at 7/8 and then a mile and a 16th. And the 7/8 races, they were certainly motoring, as we would expect for kind of the distance. And then even last time out, he was very forward tracking and second in that race at Churchill Downs. So I agree. I think the pace is going to be on early on in this event.
And if the pace is fast, you might want to keep an eye on the first horse we'll discuss. That's the number 1 Woodcourt, who has the fastest time form US late pace rating and has been a very useful $50,000 claim. I mean, he ended up finishing 4th in a $1 million race, the Rebel, 3rd in the Illinois Derby last time out, although a well-beaten 3rd and behind one of these.
He's made a lot of money in his 12 starts. You can't knock him there with those 4 wins, $381,000 there in terms of purse earnings. And you look at him, he won at 5.5. And I feel like sometimes when you look at the 4.5, 5.5 furlong races, you never know what you're going to get down the road. They sometimes blossom early and then we don't hear from them. Now, his last win at Oaklawn Park, it was a good performance. He had to circle most of the field to get the job done, got up in time. But I think his last 3, even though he was 4th in the Rebel or 3rd in the Illinois Derby, he's been well beaten, especially in the Illinois Derby. It ended up being a strung out field when it was all said and done. And I think he will need to take a huge step forward. I don't know how much I want to read into the Illinois Derby at Hawthorne, knowing that he got a 60 buyer for finishing 3rd. It's a pretty low figure, in my opinion, especially compared to what he had in the past. But another one that's been training locally for the barn and training very well, a couple of bullet drills.
Certainly 1 in 58 and change. Woodcourt should be on his toes. Stronghold finished 1st or 2nd in his first 6 starts. I thought Phil D'Amato managed him very well to get him into the Derby, winning the Sunland Derby and realizing that the Southern California-based 3-year-olds might not be the best we've seen in recent years. They put him in the Santa Anita Derby. He was very good in this race. Let's watch Stronghold's victory in the Santa Anita Derby. He's in between horses. He's able to get the split. He's very professional at this juncture. He goes on through. And then he gets into a fight with Imagination, and he's pretty game to win. You see EJ the Cup on the outside, just couldn't go with the top 2 in the final 16th.
He couldn't, and we kind of talked about him. He came into the win at Turf Paradise, came into this event in terms of EJ the Cup, but Stronghold, I think, did everything right here. Imagination had the jump on him in terms of position early on. We thought that Stronghold would maybe sit just off of it. That's what happened. And then to kind of have a throwdown in the stretch, that can be very difficult, but he got on the better end of it. I thought it was a good performance. And the Derby's the Derby. I don't know how people want to look into it and how detailed you dive into it. He was 7th. I don't think it was a bad performance. It's a field of 20. They've given him the time off, and he's certainly been training very well at Santa Anita. So I think, to me, the most promising thing is they decided to put him back on the East Coast and kind of give him another shot out here. And I think this is a great spot to do so.
I thought his derby was okay. Remember, that was a very fast pace. He was right up close to it in the second flight, and he actually was right in the thick of things turning into the stretch before just getting a little bit tired. He was probably a bit overmatched in this race, but this is a nice spot off of the layoff, and his last work looked good. The 3 is Real Men Violin. This horse was third in the Texas Derby. We're going to take a look at that race because EJ Won the Cup was able to win it, but Real Men Violin did some good things as well. No match for EJ Won the Cup, who's going to be on the outside and grind down the leader. But Real Men Violin continues his good run. He's hit the board in his last 2, and he's graded stakes placed in his career at this distance.
Yeah. The concern is maybe as someone that's backed him in the Risen Star, he's 1 for 10. He's got a lot of minor shares. He's maybe a tough horse to make a top sort of pick consideration for. But I also look at the race in the Texas Derby. We didn't show the break. I think he kind of broke. I don't want to say slow, but he was towards the back and then kind of had to make his move maybe a little early. Maybe that took something out of him. All in all, though, still a good performance. I think when you look at him down the page, I don't think we've seen the best from him yet. And when we saw him at Churchill back in the fall, very, very well meant second. A nice performance from him. So I think this is kind of the right sort of regrouping spot. Kenny McPeek, we talk about Brad Cox and other races at Indiana. This is sort of where they regroup. They do very well with this.
And you can't go wrong with McPeek and Hernandez. Hernandez back aboard Real Men Violin, and he was on for the lone lifetime win. Kitty Hawk is up next. This horse was listed as a vet scratch on June the 27th, but his most recent start at Churchill Downs, he showed speed. And watching the races at Churchill that day, I thought the rail wasn't very good. He was down inside setting the pace, and maybe that sort of worked against him. Also, his last 2 races, though, against winners have just not been very good, and this is a tough spot.
No, when you start to try to make the case for it, was it the sloppy track at Keeneland? Was it going a mile and 3/16 in his following start? It's tough to say. I mean, we can see horses that can go a mile and 3/16 on the front end, no issue. So starting to wonder a little bit if it's a stamina sort of situation. When he won at Churchill, I think for a mile and a 16th, when you look at how he was able to slow it down at the half, I think that's what aided his performance, and that's why he was able to graduate. So he will need to take a step forward if they opt for this spot, and concerned that with a hot pace, is he going to surrender late? My feeling is that's probably what would happen.
Informed Patriot's been sort of an in and outer for trainer Steve Asmussen. He won the Bathhouse Row at Oaklawn Park, 2 starts back, going a mile and an eighth. He looked pretty good doing it, getting right up close to the pace and grinding it out. In the Texas Derby, he finished behind a couple of these, but he had a little bit of trouble in that race that might have compromised him.
He did, and he took a lot of respect in terms of the tote action, and in terms of his off odds in that spot. And he's a horse that I think the connection probably had high hopes for, and they used the Bathhouse Row as an opportunity to regroup towards kind of those last couple of weeks at the Oaklawn meet. And I think I could draw a line through his Texas Derby performance. I do think he showed enough in the Bathhouse Row, but I think a big thing with that as well, he was a little bit more forward than we've seen in the past. And again, fractions weren't that hot early on.
Sir Greyland is the number 6. Still a lot of upside for this guy. He's won 2 of 3 lifetime starts. He's a reformed claimer who certainly deserves a chance to step things up into the stakes ranks, but it is a big class ask. And as we saw from the pace projector, the pace expected to be fast. He likes to be close.
He likes to be close. And I think when we saw him, I think in the pace projection, he's sitting about 4th early on. He could be a little bit more forward than that, or maybe he won't be able to. So it seems like the pace will be hot early on, and he might have to learn how to rate. Luckily, he already knows how to do that. He does not need the lead. We've seen that he's comfortable with a target in front of him, but this is a class test for him. And I will say I do like the way that he won last time out on that stretch out in distance from the 1 turn distances to 2.
EJ Won the Cup, has won 3 of his last 4 races, and while he was beaten in the Santa Anita Derby, he was one of 4 next out winners to emerge from the race when he won the Texas Derby, the video we showed you earlier on, and it was a good performance. Mike Smith gave him a nice trip. He was able to save ground. He tipped out. He wore down the pace setter, and he showed in that race that he could sit. And I think that's a key, because earlier in his career, he was kind of a speed crazy type. With this new dimension, it gives Doug O'Neill plenty of options.
You said it perfectly there. I mean, that's the big thing when you look at the Texas Derby. He was several lengths off the pace early on. We typically don't see that. At most, length or 2 maximum. He just showed something different when he was able to rate, and I like that, especially in this field. I think this is going to set up nicely for him to kind of make the late move.
And Dragoon Guard is just your typical Juddmonte, isn't he? He has a gorgeous pedigree and he's run very, very well. A 91 Beyer speed figure last time out at Churchill. Now, that race is a one-turn mile. We're going to go back to his race at Keeneland, 2 starts back at 7/8 of the mile, and the gorgeous gray just sat off of the lead and he just extends in the stretch. This was an 88 Beyer performance, his first start off the layoff. He got the 91 last time out at Churchill, going the one-turn mile in the slop. Really not too concerned about the 2 turns. He might have to face faster fractions than he's ever seen, however.
He might, but we see that he's another one that he's been able to sit just off of it and make the late run. I think the big thing is how he's going to handle 2 turns, especially coming out of that 1 turn race at Churchill over and off track. But in terms of figures, you can understand why he's been put in this spot. He fits this level of competition at this point in his career. And I think you always say the line, he could be anything. He could be anything at this point. And it looks like he's probably going to be a short price come Saturday.
Let's take a look at our top picks for the Grade 3 Indiana Derby. We're going to go with sort of the gatekeeper, Stronghold. We know what he is. When he shows up, he runs good races against good competition. It'll be a nice test for the others to see if they could handle him. And if they do, bigger and better perhaps on the horizon for a horse like Dragoon Guard.
Yeah, I think Stronghold, when you look at the Santa Anita Derby, you can go to the Sunland Derby. I think to me, it was going from the Sunland Derby to the Santa Anita Derby that he proved himself. The field wasn't necessarily the best Santa Anita Derby that we've ever seen, but he did beat EJ, won the Cup, and the way that he did it, I think that sort of trip will work out beautifully for him, this weekend. And I like that they gave him the time off after the Derby. They didn't chase any other dreams with him. They decided this is how they're going to regroup and kind of plan things out from there.
Real nice test for some of these 3-year-olds. Ashley's going 2.873. I'm going 2.875. Curious to see what Dragoon Guard does for Brad Cox. Curious to see if Stronghold can get back to the winner's circle.